close your eyes and let your breath settle into a gentle rhythm. Imagine a world bathed in the soft glow of twilight, where the whispers of history carry on the evening breeze. Tonight, we embark on a journey through time, a gentle exploration of how women's anxieties have been understood and addressed across the ages. We'll travel through centuries, from ancient civilizations to more recent times, encountering a tapestry of beliefs and practices, some insightful, others sadly misguided. Our journey begins not with judgment, but with empathy. We'll explore a landscape where the very nature of anxiety was often misunderstood, where the inner turmoil of a woman might be attributed to supernatural forces, imbalances of humors, or simply a lack of proper feminine decorum. We'll see how societal expectations and the limited understanding of the female mind shape the treatments, or rather, the attempts at treatments, offered to women struggling with what we now recognize as anxiety. Consider, for a moment, the weight of expectation placed upon women throughout history. The roles they were expected to fill, the societal pressures they faced, the restrictions on their freedoms. All of these could contribute to a sense of unease and anxiety. And yet, the very expression of such feelings might be deemed inappropriate, even shameful. This silence, this enforced stoicism, only served to further isolate and stigmatize women struggling with their mental well-being. Our exploration will be a gentle one, a quiet contemplation of the past. We won't dwell on the harsh realities or the failures of past practices, but rather, we will strive to understand the context in which these treatments arose. We'll examine the prevailing beliefs, the limitations of medical knowledge, and the societal pressures that shape the landscape of women's mental health care throughout history. We will begin in ancient times, where the understanding of the human mind was rudimentary and explanations for mental distress often relied on superstition and the supernatural. We will then move through the ages, witnessing the evolution of medical understanding, the gradual shift from purely spiritual explanations to more physiological ones, and the slow but steady progress toward a more compassionate and informed approach to women's mental health. Along the way, we'll encounter many different methods, some seemingly bizarre by today's standards, others surprisingly prescient for their time. We'll see how the diagnosis and treatment of anxiety in women were often interwoven with the prevailing societal norms and gender roles. We'll examine how the very concept of female hysteria shaped the medical landscape for centuries, influencing the types of treatments prescribed. It's crucial to remember that the people of those times were operating within their own understanding of the world, and it's with that understanding that we will approach our journey. We will view these historical practices not as evidence of cruelty or ignorance, but as snapshots of a time when the understanding of the mind was still in its infancy, and women's voices were often unheard. This will be a journey not just of historical facts, but also of empathy and understanding. We'll delve into the experiences of women who lived through these times, imagining their struggles and their resilience. We'll uncover the stories behind the treatments, seeing them not as isolated incidents, but as part of a larger narrative of women's experiences and their ongoing quest for mental well-being. So, breathe deeply and allow yourself to be transported to another time. Let the gentle rhythm of my voice guide you through this historical tapestry as we explore the fascinating and sometimes unsettling history of how women's anxiety was understood and treated throughout the ages. Let us remember that even amidst the challenges and misunderstandings, women have always shown incredible resilience, strength, and an unwavering spirit. And as we journey through these stories, may we find a deeper appreciation for the progress made and a renewed commitment to supporting women's mental health today. Our journey begins now, with the echoes of the past whispering in our ears. Let us listen carefully and learn from the experiences of those who came before us. Let the gentle rhythm of our breath and the calming cadence of my voice guide you through this historical narrative, and may you find peace and rest as we journey together. And so we begin. Now, let's travel back in time to the sun-drenched lands of ancient Greece. Here, Amidst the grandeur of the Parthenon and the whispers of philosophical debate, we encounter a fascinating and often unsettling explanation for female distress: the wandering womb. This ancient theory, deeply ingrained in Greek medical thought, posited that the uterus or womb was not a fixed organ, but rather a mobile entity capable of traveling throughout the body, causing a variety of ailments along its journey. Imagine, if you will, the anxieties and uncertainties of a woman in ancient Greece experiencing physical or emotional distress. There was no understanding of neurotransmitters, hormones, or the intricate workings of the brain. Instead, the explanation often lay in this elusive, wandering womb, a metaphor for the mysterious and often misunderstood female body. This theory, while seemingly fantastical to modern ears, provided a framework for understanding a range of symptoms. If a woman experienced physical discomfort, such as abdominal pain or bloating, it might be attributed to the womb's displacement. Similarly, emotional distress, including anxiety, irritability, and even melancholia, could be explained by the womb's restless wanderings. The womb, in this view, wasn't merely a reproductive organ. It was a vital force, a source of both life and potential chaos. The impact of this theory on diagnosis and treatment was profound. Since the wandering womb was believed to be the root cause of many ailments, treatments focused on guiding it back to its rightful place. These treatments, while viewed through a modern lens, might seem strange or even unsettling, were born out of the best medical understanding of the time. They were attempts to address the perceived imbalance, to restore harmony to the body, and to alleviate the suffering of women. One common treatment involved strong-smelling substances, often herbs or perfumes, held close to the nose to lure the wayward womb back to its proper location. The idea was to use the fragrant aromas to entice the womb, gently coaxing it back to its position in the pelvis. Imagine the scene: a woman, perhaps lying on a comfortable couch, with a fragrant sachet held near her nose, the gentle aroma a subtle attempt to soothe her body and calm her mind. It is important to remember that these were not intended as punishments, but as attempts to provide relief. Another approach involved using pessaries, small medicinal devices inserted into the vagina. These pessaries, often made from herbal mixtures, aimed to both physically reposition the womb and also offer medicinal benefits. The insertion of these pessaries would have undoubtedly been a personal experience, varying from woman to woman, and its effectiveness was likely more dependent on the placebo effect and the reassurance it provided than on any true physical repositioning of the womb. In more severe cases, the wandering womb might be treated through a variety of other methods, some quite invasive. These treatments highlight the limited understanding of the time and the desperate attempts to alleviate suffering using the available knowledge and resources. We must approach these practices with empathy, recognizing the context in which they were used and understanding that they reflected the best medical understanding of the time. Beyond physical treatments, the wandering womb theory also influenced the social and cultural treatment of women. Women exhibiting symptoms often face social stigma, their behavior and complaints being attributed to this wandering organ, rather than to more complex emotional or psychological factors. This further underscores the importance of understanding the historical context in which these practices occurred and the limitations placed upon the women experiencing such distress. As we move on from the ancient Greek understanding of the wandering womb, it is important to remember that this theory, while incorrect, reflects a sincere attempt to address women's suffering. The beliefs and practices of the time were shaped by the limited medical knowledge and the prevailing cultural norms. This understanding allows us to approach the history of women's mental health with empathy and a deeper appreciation for the progress made towards more accurate diagnoses and more effective treatments. The journey continues as we now turn our attention to another era and another perspective on women's anxiety. Let's continue, gently, into the next chapter of our story. Now, let's delve deeper into the ancient Greek pharmacopoeia, exploring the herbal remedies employed to address the anxieties and distress experienced by women. While the concept of the wandering womb dominated medical understanding, the treatments themselves often involved a careful selection of plants believed to possess calming or restorative properties. It's important to remember that these remedies were used within a specific cultural and medical context, reflecting the knowledge and beliefs of the time. Among the most frequently used herbs was henbane, a plant with potent psychoactive properties. In ancient Greece, henbane was viewed as a powerful sedative and analgesic. It was believed to alleviate pain and induce a state of tranquility, potentially helping to calm anxieties and promote sleep. However, henbane is also highly toxic, and its use required careful consideration and precise dosages, a fact that highlights the challenges faced by ancient healers. The line between therapeutic benefit and potential harm was often very fine, reflecting the limited understanding of pharmacology at the time. Another prominent herb was mandrake, a plant with a long history of use in various cultures. In ancient Greece, mandrake root was often associated with magical and medicinal properties, and it was believed to possess potent sedative and even anesthetic effects. It was used to treat a variety of ailments, including anxiety and insomnia. However, like henbane, mandrake is also toxic, and its use carried considerable risks. Ancient healers would have relied on their experience and knowledge of the plant's properties to determine appropriate dosages, always striving to balance the potential benefits against the risks. Poppy seeds, the source of opium, were another important component of ancient Greek herbal medicine. Opium, derived from the poppy, has potent analgesic and sedative effects. In ancient Greece, it was used to relieve pain and promote sleep, potentially alleviating anxiety-related symptoms such as insomnia and restlessness. However, opium is highly addictive, and its use required careful monitoring to avoid dependence and potential harm. The ancient Greeks, while aware of some of its risks, lacked the understanding of addiction that we possess today. Beyond these potent herbs, a wide array of other plants were used in various combinations to address anxiety-related symptoms. These included herbs known for their calming and restorative properties, such as chamomile, lavender, and valerian. These herbs, while milder than henbane or mandrake, were believed to promote relaxation and ease anxiety. Often, they were combined with honey or wine to enhance their palatability and to improve their absorption by the body. These mixtures would have been carefully prepared, reflecting the ancient Greek understanding of herbal properties and the importance of combining different herbs to achieve desired effects. The effectiveness of these herbal remedies is, of course, debatable from a modern perspective. While some herbs possess genuine therapeutic properties, their use in ancient Greece was often guided by a system of medical understanding that differs greatly from our own. Moreover, the lack of precise dosage control and the inherent toxicity of some of the herbs used presented significant challenges. It is crucial to remember that we cannot judge these practices by modern standards. We should instead strive to understand the beliefs and limitations of ancient Greek healers, acknowledging their genuine desire to alleviate suffering and to improve the well-being of their patients. Furthermore, the effectiveness of these remedies would also have varied depending on numerous factors, including the quality of the herbs used, the patient's individual response, and the specific nature of the anxiety being treated. A holistic approach was often adopted, combining herbal remedies with other practices such as massage, hydrotherapy, and even music therapy to enhance their effectiveness. This reflects a broader understanding of health and well-being within ancient Greek culture, highlighting the interconnectedness of mind and body. In conclusion, the herbal remedies used in ancient Greece to address anxiety-related symptoms represented a thoughtful, albeit limited, attempt to alleviate suffering. These practices reflected the prevailing medical understanding of the time, which, while different from our own, was based on careful observation, empirical evidence, and a deep respect for the power of nature. As we move forward in our exploration, we'll encounter other fascinating perspectives on women's anxiety throughout history, each shaped by its own unique cultural and medical context. Let us proceed with gentle curiosity and an unwavering sense of empathy, remembering that each era's understanding of mental health holds valuable lessons for us today. As we journey through time, let us now consider the medieval period, a time when religious beliefs profoundly shaped the understanding and treatment of all aspects of life, including women's emotional well-being. The anxieties and distress experienced by women were often interpreted through a religious lens, with explanations rooted in spiritual battles, demonic influence, and the ever-present shadow of sin. It's crucial to approach this era with empathy, recognizing that the beliefs and practices of the time reflected the prevailing worldview, even if those beliefs differ greatly from our own. In the medieval world, the concept of demonic possession held significant sway. Women experiencing intense anxiety, particularly if accompanied by unusual physical or behavioral manifestations, were often suspected of being possessed by evil spirits. This belief stemmed from a deeply ingrained theological framework that saw the world as a constant battleground between good and evil, with individuals vulnerable to demonic influence. The symptoms of anxiety, the palpitations, the trembling, the feelings of dread, could easily be interpreted as evidence of a malevolent supernatural force at work. The consequences of such accusations could be devastating. Women suspected of demonic possession faced a range of interventions, often harsh and deeply unsettling. Exorcisms, designed to expel the evil spirits, were common. These rituals could involve prayers, incantations, and even physical restraints, all intended to overcome the perceived demonic influence. The experiences of women undergoing exorcisms could be profoundly traumatic, intensifying their distress rather than alleviating it. Alongside exorcism, other spiritual remedies were employed. These range from pilgrimages to sacred sites, believed to possess healing powers, to the use of holy relics and blessed objects. Women might undertake arduous journeys to seek the intercession of saints known for their healing abilities, hoping for spiritual solace and relief from their anxieties. The belief in the power of faith and divine intervention offered a source of hope and comfort in a world where medical understanding was limited. Prayer and penance were also frequently prescribed. Women were encouraged to devote themselves to intense prayer and acts of self-denial, believing that such devotion would strengthen their spiritual defenses and weaken the influence of evil spirits. While these practices might have offered a sense of solace and purpose for some, for others, they may have added to feelings of guilt and inadequacy, potentially exacerbating their anxiety. The role of the Church in medieval society further reinforced these religious explanations. Clergymen often played a central role in diagnosing and treating women's emotional distress, interpreting their symptoms through the lens of religious doctrine. Their authority and influence ensured that religious explanations remained dominant, shaping not only the understanding of women's anxiety, but also the available treatment options. It's important to remember that these religious interpretations were not necessarily intended to be cruel or oppressive. They reflected the deeply held beliefs of the time, providing a framework for understanding and addressing conditions that were poorly understood from a medical perspective. The belief in demonic possession and the efficacy of spiritual remedies stemmed from a genuine desire to alleviate suffering and offer comfort to those in need. However, it's equally crucial to acknowledge the limitations of this worldview, recognizing the potential for misdiagnosis, harmful treatments, and the perpetuation of societal biases. As we reflect on the medieval period, let us acknowledge the complexities of its religious beliefs and practices. The blending of spiritual and physical explanations for women's anxiety reveals a fascinating interplay between faith, fear, and the limitations of medical knowledge. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit that women in this era sought solace and healing, even within a framework that might seem, from a modern perspective, both challenging and restrictive. Our journey through history continues, illuminating the diverse ways in which women's anxiety has been understood and addressed across the ages. Let us proceed with compassion and a commitment to understanding the past in all its nuances. Now, let us gently turn our attention to the medieval period and a practice that permeated medical thought across many cultures: bloodletting. Imagine, if you will, a time when the humors blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile were believed to govern health and well-being. An imbalance in these humors, it was thought, could lead to a variety of ailments, including the anxieties that plagued many women. And the solution, according to the prevailing medical wisdom, was often bloodletting. Bloodletting, the practice of removing blood from the body, was a widespread and deeply ingrained medical procedure in the medieval world. It was believed that removing excess blood would restore the balance of the humors and alleviate a wide range of symptoms, including those associated with anxiety. From a modern perspective, this seems counterintuitive, even dangerous, but within the context of medieval medical understanding, it was a logical, if tragically flawed, approach. The methods of bloodletting varied. Sometimes, leeches were applied to the skin, their sucking action drawing blood from the body. Other times, lancets or fleams, small, sharp instruments, were used to make incisions in veins, allowing blood to flow freely. The amount of blood removed could vary considerably, depending on the severity of the ailment and the judgment of the practitioner. The application of leeches, though seemingly gentler, was not without its dangers. While leeches themselves are relatively harmless creatures, the risk of infection was ever present. Unsanitary conditions and a lack of understanding of germ theory meant that even minor wounds could lead to serious complications, potentially worsening the patient's condition rather than improving it. The leeches themselves, if not properly sourced and handled, could introduce bacteria and parasites in the bloodstream. The use of lancets and fleams carried even greater risks. The incisions, if not made precisely, could damage nerves or arteries, leading to severe bleeding or other complications. The lack of effective anesthesia meant that the procedure was often painful, adding to the patient's distress. And the removal of significant quantities of blood, while intended to restore humoral balance, could lead to anemia, weakness, and further health problems. For women experiencing anxiety, the effects of bloodletting could be particularly detrimental. The already weakened state of a woman suffering from anxiety would be further compromised by the loss of blood. The resulting weakness and fatigue could exacerbate feelings of anxiety and helplessness, creating a vicious cycle of distress. The practice of bloodletting persisted for centuries, despite its lack of efficacy and significant risks. It was used to treat a wide range of ailments, from headaches and fevers to mental health conditions like anxiety. The persistence of this practice reflects the limitations of medical knowledge during the medieval period and the challenges faced in understanding and treating complex conditions. It's important to remember that the practitioners of bloodletting were not intentionally inflicting harm. They were working within the framework of the medical understanding of their time, believing that they were providing a necessary and effective treatment. Their actions, however misguided from a modern perspective, were rooted in a desire to alleviate suffering and improve the health of their patients. But this highlights the importance of understanding the limits of medical knowledge in different historical periods and the need for a cautious and empathetic approach when examining past medical practices. As we move forward in our exploration of the historical treatment of women's anxiety, let us carry with us a deep appreciation for the challenges faced by both patients and practitioners in times past. The medieval period, with its reliance on bloodletting, serves as a poignant reminder of the evolving understanding of health and the ongoing search for effective and compassionate treatments. Our journey continues, and with each step, we gain a deeper understanding of the rich and complex tapestry of women's experiences throughout history. As we journey further through time, we arrive at a period where the understanding, or rather, the misunderstanding of women's emotional distress took a significant and unfortunately enduring turn. The concept of hysteria, a term deeply rooted in societal biases and a lack of true medical understanding, emerged and would cast a long shadow over the treatment of women's mental health for centuries. The term hysteria, derived from the Greek word for uterus, began to gain traction in the medical discourse of the medieval period. Initially associated with physical symptoms, such as pain and discomfort, its meaning slowly broadened to encompass a wide range of emotional and psychological experiences. By the 18th century, hysteria had become a catch-all diagnosis for any behavior deemed unfeminine or inappropriate in women. This included a broad spectrum of emotions, from sadness and anxiety to irritability and even what we might now term as assertiveness or independent thought. The association of hysteria with the uterus, a notion inherited from ancient Greek humoral theory, cemented its position as a uniquely female ailment. This pathologization of female emotions effectively silenced women's voices and experiences, shaping their identities and societal roles. The diagnosis of hysteria not only failed to address the underlying causes of women's distress, but actively contributed to their marginalization and oppression. It's important to understand that the physicians of this era were not intentionally malicious. They were working with the knowledge available to them, which unfortunately was heavily influenced by prevailing social norms and gender biases. The very idea that a woman's emotional state could be rooted in a physical organ, the uterus, reflects a deep-seated belief in the inherent inferiority and fragility of women. The uterus, in this context, became a symbol of female weakness, a source of irrationality and instability. The symptoms attributed to hysteria were often vague and subjective, further emphasizing the diagnosis's inherent ambiguity. Anything from nervousness and palpitations to fainting spells and emotional outbursts could be attributed to hysteria. This lack of specificity allowed for broad application, effectively pathologizing a wide range of female behaviors that deviated from societal expectations. The diagnosis became a convenient way to dismiss or explain away women's emotional experiences, often without any serious investigation into underlying causes. The treatments for hysteria range from the mildly inconvenient to the frankly bizarre. Rest cures, designed to keep women confined and inactive, were frequently prescribed. These cures further reinforced the societal expectation of passivity and domesticity for women. Other treatments included the use of various tonics and remedies, often containing questionable ingredients, reflecting the lack of rigorous scientific standards of the time. Perhaps the most infamous treatment associated with hysteria was the use of the vibrator. Developed in the late 19th century, this device, initially marketed as a medical instrument, was used to induce what was believed to be a therapeutic orgasm, aiming to restore the supposed humoral balance in the female body. This treatment, while seemingly odd by today's standards, highlights the desperation of both physicians and patients to find a cure for the elusive and subjective symptoms of hysteria. The legacy of hysteria extends far beyond the 18th century. The diagnosis continued to be used throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, highlighting the profound and persistent influence of societal biases on medical practice. The enduring impact of hysteria underscores the importance of understanding how social and cultural factors shape our understanding of health and illness, particularly when it comes to women's health. As we reflect on the rise and impact of hysteria, we must acknowledge the immense harm it caused to countless women. It silenced their voices, invalidated their experiences, and subjected them to unnecessary and often harmful treatments. The story of hysteria serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of allowing societal biases to influence medical diagnosis and treatment. It also underscores the vital need for a critical examination of medical practices and a commitment to ensuring that all individuals, regardless of gender, receive equitable and effective health care. We move forward with a greater understanding of the complex interplay between societal norms, medical practice, and the historical experience of women's anxiety. Our journey into the past continues, and with each step, we gain a deeper appreciation for the resilience and strength of women throughout history. Now, let's delve into the specific treatments employed during the 18th century to address the pervasive diagnosis of hysteria. It's a chapter filled with curious remedies and interventions, often reflecting the limited understanding of the female body and mind at the time. We must approach this with empathy, recognizing that the practitioners of the era were working within the confines of their knowledge, even if that knowledge often fell short. One common approach involved the use of perfumes and aromatic substances. These were believed to have a calming and restorative effect on the nervous system, helping to alleviate the symptoms associated with hysteria. Imagine delicate vials filled with fragrant concoctions, their contents carefully selected for their supposed ability to soothe the agitated spirit. Rosewater, lavender, and other calming scents were often incorporated into these treatments. While the intention may have been benevolent, the effectiveness of these treatments was, at best, questionable. Another treatment involved the use of vaginal pessaries. These were small, medicated devices inserted into the vagina, aiming to address the supposed imbalance within the female reproductive system, which was believed to be the root cause of hysteria. The pessaries themselves varied in composition, ranging from simple herbs and minerals to more complex concoctions. Some contained soothing ingredients, while others were designed to exert a more forceful, even astringent effect. These treatments often cause discomfort and irritation, and their effectiveness remains unproven. Beyond perfumes and pessaries, other interventions were employed to address the multifaceted symptoms of hysteria. Rest cures were frequently prescribed, requiring women to withdraw from their daily activities and engage in prolonged periods of rest and relaxation. These periods of enforced inactivity were often coupled with a strict regimen of diet and exercise, further limiting women's freedom and autonomy. While rest might seem beneficial for many conditions, in this context, it served to reinforce the idea of women as inherently fragile and in need of constant care. The social isolation inherent in these rest cures had a profound impact on women's well-being. Separated from their families, friends, and social networks, women were often left feeling vulnerable and isolated. This isolation, ironically, could exacerbate the very symptoms these treatments aim to alleviate, creating a vicious cycle of confinement and distress. The lack of social interaction and the stifling of normal life further contributed to feelings of anxiety, depression, and hopelessness. Hydrotherapy, involving various water-based treatments, was another popular approach to treating hysteria. This could range from simple baths to more elaborate procedures involving immersion in water of different temperatures. It was believed that the therapeutic properties of water could soothe the nervous system and restore balance to the body. While some forms of hydrotherapy might have offered temporary relief, the overall effectiveness of this approach remains debatable. The experience itself could range from relaxing to quite uncomfortable, depending on the specific treatment involved. Another treatment involved the use of bloodletting. While this practice dates back to antiquity, it continued to be employed in the 18th century, reflecting the persistence of humoral theory in medical thought. Bloodletting was believed to remove excess blood from the body, thus restoring a balance of humors and alleviating a variety of ailments, including hysteria. The practice, however, was often risky, leading to complications and even death. Finally, we must consider the impact of these treatments on women's lives. The treatments were not merely physical interventions. They were deeply intertwined with the social and cultural expectations placed upon women. The very act of being diagnosed with hysteria often resulted in social isolation and marginalization. The treatments themselves, often restrictive and physically uncomfortable, further reinforced the idea of women's inherent fragility and dependency. As we reflect on these 18th century treatments for hysteria, we can see a clear pattern of interventions driven by limited medical knowledge and deeply rooted societal biases. The treatments, though often well-intentioned, were often ineffective and sometimes even harmful. They underscore the importance of understanding how societal norms and cultural beliefs can shape medical practice and lead to unequal and ineffective healthcare. The story of hysteria's treatment in the 18th century serves as a powerful reminder of the need for evidence-based medicine and a culturally sensitive approach to mental health care. The journey continues, and understanding the past helps us to build a more compassionate and effective future. The Victorian era, with its rigid social structures and evolving understanding of medicine, presented a unique context for the treatment of women's anxieties. While the diagnosis of hysteria persisted, the approach to treatment took a rather peculiar turn with the rise in popularity of the rest cure. This seemingly innocuous term concealed a complex and often detrimental approach to managing women's emotional and physical distress. Picture this: a woman, perhaps exhibiting symptoms of what we might now recognize as anxiety or depression, is prescribed a rest cure. This isn't simply a few days of relaxation. It's a prolonged period of enforced inactivity, often lasting for weeks or even months. She's confined to her bed or room, forbidden from engaging in any form of intellectual or physical exertion. Reading, writing, socializing, all are strictly prohibited. The aim, according to the medical practitioners of the time, was to allow the nervous system to completely rest and recover. However, the reality of these rest cures often fell far short of their intended purpose. The enforced inactivity, combined with the isolation and lack of stimulation, frequently resulted in a worsening of the very symptoms they aimed to alleviate. Women, already grappling with anxiety and depression, found themselves further debilitated by the relentless monotony and lack of social interaction. The enforced idleness could lead to feelings of worthlessness and despair, deepening their mental distress. The physical consequences of these rest cures were equally concerning. Prolonged bed rest often resulted in muscle atrophy, weakness, and a general decline in physical health. The lack of movement hindered circulation and contributed to digestive problems. The overall effect was a decline in physical well-being, further compounding the emotional distress experienced by these women. Moreover, the rest cure was often accompanied by a severely restricted diet, further weakening the body. These restrictive diets, often consisting of bland and unappetizing foods, were intended to assist the rest of the nervous system. However, this approach ignored the body's need for proper nutrition to maintain both physical and mental health. Malnutrition, a common consequence of these restrictive diets, could further exacerbate the existing symptoms of anxiety and depression. It's crucial to understand the social context in which these rest cures were prescribed. Victorian society often confined women to the domestic sphere, placing immense pressure on them to fulfill their roles as wives and mothers. Any deviation from these societal expectations was often met with disapproval, and symptoms of anxiety or depression were often interpreted as a failure to meet these stringent demands. The rest cure, therefore, served not only as a medical intervention, but also as a tool of social control. By confining women to their beds and restricting their activities, society effectively silenced their voices and reinforced their subordinate position. The cure itself became a reflection of the patriarchal structures that constrained women's lives and limited their opportunities. The leading proponent of the rest cure, Dr. Silas Weir Mitchell, believed his method was revolutionary. He championed it as a way to restore women's health, but his approach often prioritized enforced rest and isolation above all else. His methods, while intended to be therapeutic, inadvertently exacerbated the very problems they aimed to address. The psychological impact of the rest cure was often devastating. The enforced isolation and lack of stimulation led to feelings of hopelessness and despair. Women were cut off from their social networks, deprived of meaningful activities, and left with little to occupy their minds. This isolation, coupled with the physical limitations imposed by the cure, could lead to a profound sense of powerlessness and loss of self-worth. It's important to remember that these women weren't simply suffering from physical ailments. They were experiencing the complexities of mental health issues within a profoundly restrictive social context. The rest cure, instead of offering a path to recovery, often became a mechanism that further marginalized and silenced them. It's a stark reminder of how societal expectations and limited medical understanding can interact to produce ineffective and even harmful treatment approaches. The legacy of the Victorian rest cure serves as a cautionary tale. It highlights the need for a holistic approach to mental health care, one that acknowledges the interplay between physical and psychological well-being and the profound influence of social and cultural factors. It underscores the critical importance of understanding the historical context of mental health treatment and recognizing the potential for well-intentioned interventions to unintentionally cause harm. The story of the rest cure reminds us of the ongoing journey towards a more compassionate and effective approach to mental health, one that respects individual needs and rights above all else. As the Victorian era progressed, the treatment of women's anxieties evolved, shifting from the solitary confinement of the rest cure to the more structured environment of the sanatorium. These institutions, while ostensibly designed to offer therapeutic care, often reflected the prevailing societal attitudes towards women and mental illness, resulting in experiences that were far from restorative for many. Imagine stepping into a Victorian sanatorium. Tall, imposing buildings nestled amidst carefully manicured lawns, an air of quiet solemnity hanging heavy in the air. The architecture itself, often grand and imposing, was meant to project an image of order and control, reflecting the societal approach to mental illness at the time. The reality within these walls, however, was often far more complex and nuanced. For women suffering from anxiety, or what was often diagnosed as hysteria, the sanatorium represented both a refuge and a prison. It offered a degree of separation from the pressures of daily life, a respite from the demanding roles expected of women in Victorian society. But this separation often came at a cost. Within the confines of these institutions, women faced a complex array of treatments, many of which were rooted in the limited medical understanding of the time. The daily routines within these sanatoriums were rigidly structured, emphasizing order and discipline. Waking hours were meticulously scheduled, with a focus on structured activities designed to regulate the nervous system. These activities often included light exercise, such as walks in the carefully maintained gardens, and quiet pursuits like needlework or reading. While seemingly benign, these structured activities served to control the women's time and limit their autonomy, reinforcing the sense of helplessness that often accompanied their anxiety. The medical interventions within these sanatoriums range from the relatively harmless to the downright harmful. Hydrotherapy, involving various water treatments like baths and showers, was a common practice. While intended to soothe and calm the nervous system, the intensity and frequency of these treatments could be physically and emotionally draining. Other treatments, such as electrotherapy, were far more invasive and potentially dangerous, reflecting the limited understanding of the delicate balance of the nervous system. The social dynamics within the sanatoriums were often complex and challenging. The hierarchical structure of the institution, with its strict rules and regulations, reinforced the power imbalance between the medical staff and the patients. Women were often stripped of their individuality, their identities reduced to their diagnoses. The enforced social interactions among the patients could be emotionally draining, often exacerbating feelings of isolation and vulnerability. Moreover, the sanatoriums often served as a means of social control, removing women from society when their behavior deviated from accepted norms. Women who challenged societal expectations or exhibited symptoms of anxiety that were deemed unacceptable could be confined to these institutions, essentially isolating them from their families and communities. This forced confinement could further worsen their mental health, reinforcing the very issues the sanatorium was supposed to address. The experiences of women within these sanatoriums were varied and complex. For some, the structured environment and medical interventions provided a degree of comfort and stability. The routine and social interaction, however limited, could offer a sense of normalcy in a life that was otherwise defined by anxiety and distress. For others, the restrictive environment, the invasive treatments, and the loss of autonomy exacerbated their symptoms, leading to feelings of despair and hopelessness. The Victorian sanatorium, therefore, serves as a powerful reminder of the complexities of mental health treatment throughout history. It highlights the limitations of medical understanding, the impact of societal attitudes, and the importance of compassionate and patient-centered care. The experiences of women within these institutions underscore the need for holistic approaches to mental health, recognizing the intricate interplay between the physical, emotional, and social aspects of well-being. These institutions, meant to heal, often perpetuated a cycle of isolation and control, a reflection of the societal biases and medical limitations of their time. The stories of the women confined within their walls offer a poignant reminder of the long and challenging journey towards a more compassionate and effective approach to mental health treatment, one that prioritizes individual dignity and autonomy above all else. The echoes of their experiences resonate even today, reminding us of the importance of ongoing progress and the enduring need for understanding and support. The 19th century saw the rise of moral treatment as a prominent approach to mental illness, including the anxieties experienced by women. This philosophy, a significant departure from the harsh and often inhumane practices of earlier eras, emphasized the importance of a humane and nurturing environment in fostering recovery. It represented a shift towards a more compassionate understanding of mental distress, acknowledging the influence of social and emotional factors on mental well-being. Imagine a setting far removed from the stark confinement of earlier asylums. Picture instead a tranquil environment, perhaps a country estate or a carefully designed institution, where patients were treated with respect and dignity. This was the ideal of moral treatment, a concept that aimed to create a supportive atmosphere conducive to healing. The focus shifted from physical restraints and harsh punishments to a more holistic approach that considered the patient's emotional and social needs. Moral treatment emphasized the importance of a structured daily routine, including activities designed to engage patients in meaningful tasks. These activities could range from gardening and light manual labor to artistic pursuits and intellectual stimulation. The goal was not merely to occupy the patient's time, but to encourage self-reliance, foster a sense of purpose, and promote social interaction. The aim was to reintegrate patients into society, fostering their sense of self-worth and agency. The role of the caregiver in moral treatment was paramount. Unlike previous approaches where caregivers might have been distant and authoritarian figures, moral treatment emphasized the importance of a warm and supportive relationship between the caregiver and the patient. This involved empathy, patience, and a genuine concern for the patient's well-being. The caregiver acted as a guide and mentor, providing encouragement and support while promoting the patient's independence. For women experiencing anxiety in the 19th century, moral treatment offered a potential avenue for healing that acknowledged the unique challenges they faced. Society's expectations often placed undue pressure on women, contributing to feelings of stress and anxiety. Moral treatment sought to create a safe space where these pressures could be mitigated, allowing women to explore their emotions and develop coping mechanisms. However, the implementation of moral treatment varied widely depending on the resources and philosophies of individual institutions. While some institutions genuinely embraced the principles of moral treatment, others merely adopted its outward trappings without fully embracing its underlying philosophy. This inconsistency led to a range of experiences for women seeking treatment, some positive and others less so. Despite its intentions, moral treatment was not without its limitations. The very concept of moral treatment could inadvertently reinforce societal expectations and judgments about appropriate female behavior. Women whose anxieties stemmed from societal constraints or gender roles might find themselves pressured to conform to idealized notions of femininity, rather than addressing the root causes of their distress. Furthermore, the effectiveness of moral treatment was often subjective and difficult to measure. While many women might have benefited from the supportive environment and structured activities, the lack of standardized diagnostic tools and outcome measures made it challenging to assess its overall efficacy. The emphasis on social and emotional factors, while important, sometimes overshadowed the need for more comprehensive medical interventions. The ethical considerations of moral treatment also warrant examination. The focus on a supportive environment did not always translate into genuine autonomy for patients. Decisions regarding treatment were often made by caregivers without fully considering the patient's perspectives and preferences. The paternalistic nature of moral treatment, while well-intentioned, could inadvertently limit a woman's agency and self-determination. In conclusion, moral treatment represented a significant advancement in the treatment of mental illness in the 19th century, offering a more humane approach than its predecessors. For women struggling with anxiety, it offered a potentially supportive environment and an opportunity for healing. However, it was not without its limitations and ethical considerations. Its inconsistent implementation, potential to reinforce societal expectations, and lack of standardized evaluation underscore the complexities of providing effective mental health care, even within a framework intended to be compassionate and patient-centered. The legacy of moral treatment serves as a reminder of the continuing evolution of mental health treatment and the importance of critically evaluating the impact of past practices on the well-being of those seeking care. As we delve deeper into the historical landscape of women's anxiety, let us gently turn our attention to the societal pressures that significantly shaped their experiences and contributed to their mental health challenges. The 19th century, often romanticized for its elegance and societal decorum, presented a complex reality for women, one fraught with restrictive expectations and limited opportunities. These limitations weren't merely inconvenient. They were deeply intertwined with the anxieties many women experienced. Imagine a life confined by societal expectations, where a woman's worth was largely defined by her domestic role. Her primary purpose, as dictated by the prevailing social norms, was to be a dutiful wife and mother, managing a household and raising a family. This prescribed role, while seemingly idyllic, often stifled individual aspirations and creativity, leaving many women feeling unfulfilled and trapped. The lack of access to education, professional careers, and independent financial resources further compounded their sense of powerlessness and dependence. The rigid social structures of the 19th century imposed strict behavioral codes on women. They were expected to be demure, submissive, and emotionally restrained. Open displays of emotion, particularly anxiety or distress, were often deemed unladylike and socially unacceptable. This pressure to suppress their feelings created a climate of emotional repression, preventing women from seeking help or expressing their anxieties openly. The internalized fear of judgment and social ostracism further exacerbated their mental health struggles. Consider the limitations placed upon women's social interactions. Their movements and activities were often restricted, limiting their opportunities for social engagement and support. The emphasis on domesticity confined many women to their homes, isolating them from broader social networks and reducing their access to external resources and perspectives. This lack of social connection could significantly amplify feelings of loneliness, anxiety, and isolation. The prevailing medical understanding of the time often failed to acknowledge the profound impact of these societal pressures on women's mental health. Instead, anxieties were frequently attributed to inherent female weaknesses or imbalances, reinforcing the notion of women as inherently fragile and emotionally unstable. This medical perspective often led to treatments that were not only ineffective but also further disempowered women, limiting their agency and control over their own lives. Furthermore, the lack of adequate mental health services specifically tailored to women's needs left them vulnerable and without appropriate support. The limited understanding of the interplay between social factors and mental well-being meant that treatments often failed to address the underlying societal pressures that contributed to women's anxieties. This gap in care exacerbated the suffering of many women, leaving them feeling isolated, misunderstood, and without recourse. The constraints imposed on women extended beyond the domestic sphere, affecting their access to education and professional opportunities. Limited access to higher education and professional training meant that many women were denied the opportunities for self-expression and personal fulfillment that could have alleviated their anxieties. This restricted access to knowledge and empowerment further reinforced their dependence on men and limited their control over their lives. The economic dependence of many women on their husbands or fathers also contributed to their vulnerability. Without financial independence, women had limited options if their relationships were strained or their domestic situations were stressful. This lack of economic agency further constrained their ability to seek help, escape abusive situations, or pursue their own goals, increasing their susceptibility to anxiety and distress. Moreover, the social stigma surrounding mental illness in the 19th century added another layer of complexity to women's experiences. Seeking help for anxiety or other mental health conditions was often viewed as shameful and embarrassing, leading many women to suffer in silence. Fear of social rejection and the potential for damage to their reputation prevented many women from seeking the support they desperately needed. In conclusion, the societal pressures and limitations faced by women in the 19th century played a significant role in shaping their experiences of anxiety and mental health challenges. The rigid social expectations, restricted opportunities, economic dependence, and social stigma created a complex and often oppressive environment that contributed to their suffering. Understanding these societal factors is crucial to appreciating the historical context of women's anxieties and the challenges they faced in seeking help and achieving mental well-being. The legacy of these constraints serves as a reminder of the ongoing need to address societal inequalities and promote a more supportive and understanding environment for women's mental health. Now, as the gentle currents of time carry us into the early 20th century, we encounter a chapter in the history of women's anxiety that is both unsettling and sobering. The emergence and early application of electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT. While intended as a treatment, its early iterations were often brutal, lacking the safeguards and ethical considerations we expect today. Let us approach this period with empathy, acknowledging the suffering of those who endured these procedures and the limitations of medical understanding at the time. The development of ECT emerged from a desire to find effective treatments for severe mental illnesses, including conditions that manifested as profound anxiety. Early forms of ECT, however, were far from the refined procedures used today. Imagine, if you will, a time when the application of electric currents to the brain was considered a viable method to alleviate mental distress, with little regard for the patient's comfort or long-term well-being. The early use of ECT was often characterized by a shocking lack of informed consent. Women, particularly those deemed to be suffering from hysteria or other vaguely defined mental illnesses, were frequently subjected to these treatments without a full understanding of the procedure's potential risks and side effects. Their voices, their agency, their right to refuse treatment were often overlooked or disregarded. Their vulnerability was exploited, their bodies treated as vessels for experimental therapies. The procedures themselves were often brutal and terrifying. Patients were sometimes restrained forcefully, their bodies held down while powerful electric currents were passed through their brains. The resulting seizures could be violent and prolonged, leaving patients with physical injuries, cognitive impairments, and lingering trauma. The sheer terror and physical pain inflicted upon these women can scarcely be imagined. Let us try to paint a picture, not to sensationalize, but to understand the conditions under which these treatments were administered. Picture a dimly lit room, the smell of antiseptic hanging heavy in the air. A woman, perhaps already distressed and confused, is strapped to a table, her body restrained. The fear in her eyes, the silent scream trapped within her, is palpable. The machine hums a low, ominous drone. Then a jolt, a violent convulsion, and the woman's body is thrown about, her struggles muted by the constraints holding her down. The lack of anesthesia in many early ECT treatments added another layer of cruelty. Imagine the searing pain, the utter helplessness, the terrifying loss of control. These women were not merely patients. They were subjected to a form of medical violence, stripped of their dignity and subjected to a procedure that inflicted physical and emotional trauma. The rationale behind these treatments often lacked scientific rigor. The understanding of the brain and its functions was limited, and the mechanisms through which ECT might alleviate mental distress were poorly understood. The treatments were often applied indiscriminately, with little regard for individual differences or the underlying causes of a woman's anxiety. It was a time of experimentation, of trial and error, with women bearing the brunt of medical uncertainty. The social context of the time also played a crucial role. Women in the early 20th century often lacked the social and political power to challenge medical authority or demand better treatment. Their experiences were frequently dismissed or ignored, their complaints brushed aside as symptoms of their illness. This power imbalance further exacerbated the vulnerability of women subjected to ECT. It is important to acknowledge that the development of ECT did eventually lead to more humane and effective treatments. Modern ECT involves the use of anesthesia and muscle relaxants, minimizing physical discomfort and reducing the risk of injury. The procedures are also carefully monitored and administered by trained professionals. However, the early history of ECT serves as a stark reminder of the ethical challenges inherent in medical practice and the importance of informed consent, patient autonomy, and compassionate care. Reflecting on this chapter in the history of women's anxiety, we are left with a profound sense of empathy and a renewed appreciation for the advancements in mental health care. The brutality of early ECT underscores the importance of ongoing vigilance in ensuring that ethical considerations are paramount in all medical practices, and that the voices and experiences of patients, particularly vulnerable populations, are heard and respected. The story of early ECT is a dark chapter, but it is a chapter that must be remembered to guide us towards a more compassionate and ethically responsible future in mental health care. As the dawn of the 20th century painted a new era, a shadow lingered over the treatment of women's anxiety, the chilling practice of forced institutionalization. This was a time when societal expectations and limited understanding of mental illness converged to create a system where women, often exhibiting symptoms of anxiety, were forcibly confined to institutions, their lives irrevocably altered. Let us approach this sensitive topic with compassion, remembering the women who endured such injustices and the enduring consequences of their experiences. The early 20th century saw a rise in the number of mental asylums and institutions. While some were intended to provide care and treatment, many lacked adequate resources and operated under a system that prioritized confinement over compassionate care. Women exhibiting anxiety symptoms, often labeled with vague diagnoses like hysteria or neurasthenia, were particularly vulnerable to this system. Their anxieties, often rooted in societal pressures and limitations, were pathologized and used to justify their removal from society. Imagine a young woman, perhaps struggling with overwhelming anxieties stemming from societal expectations or personal circumstances. Instead of receiving support and understanding, she is deemed incurable or dangerous and forcibly committed to an institution. Her cries for help are misinterpreted as symptoms of her illness, her pleas for understanding dismissed as irrational ramblings. Her family, perhaps overwhelmed or lacking understanding of mental illness, may even participate in her confinement, believing it to be the best course of action. The conditions within these institutions varied, but often fell far short of humane treatment. Overcrowding was common, leading to unsanitary conditions and a lack of privacy. Patients were often subjected to harsh treatments, including restraints, isolation, and even forms of physical punishment. The lack of individual attention and compassionate care exacerbated their anxieties and prolonged their suffering. The experience of forced institutionalization left indelible scars on the women who endured it. Separation from family and friends, the loss of autonomy and dignity, the constant feeling of confinement and helplessness, all contributed to a profound sense of isolation and despair. The stigma associated with mental illness further compounded their suffering, hindering their ability to seek help and support after their release. For many women, institutionalization meant a complete disruption of their lives. Careers were lost, relationships strained, and the chance to build a fulfilling life diminished. The trauma of confinement could persist long after their release, leading to ongoing emotional distress and difficulty reintegrating into society. The long-term consequences of forced institutionalization extended to their families, who often struggled to cope with the absence of their loved ones and the stigma associated with mental illness. The practice of forced institutionalization was not solely a result of medical ignorance. It was also deeply entwined with societal biases and gender roles. Women's anxieties were often attributed to their inherent weakness or emotional instability, reinforcing the patriarchal structures that limited their opportunities and autonomy. The system of forced institutionalization served to control and silence women who dared to deviate from societal norms or express their distress. Moreover, the lack of legal protections for individuals with mental illness further enabled the practice of forced institutionalization. Women often had little recourse to challenge their commitment, leaving them at the mercy of a system that often prioritized convenience and social control over individual well-being. Their rights were disregarded, their voices silenced. The legacy of forced institutionalization is a somber reminder of the injustices experienced by women throughout history. It underscores the importance of understanding the complex interplay between mental illness, societal pressures, and gender roles. By acknowledging this dark chapter in the history of women's mental health, we can work towards creating a more compassionate and equitable system that supports women's well-being and protects their rights. The story of forced institutionalization serves as a poignant reminder of the urgent need for empathy, understanding, and comprehensive support for women struggling with anxiety. It is a call for a future where anxieties are addressed with compassion and care, where societal pressures are acknowledged and mitigated, and where the rights and dignity of all individuals are protected. Let us carry the lessons of the past into the future, striving for a world where every woman feels safe, supported, and valued. The early 20th century, a time of burgeoning progress in many fields, presented a stark contrast when it came to understanding women's mental health. While scientific advancements were transforming other aspects of life, the diagnosis and treatment of women's anxiety remained shrouded in misconceptions and a profound lack of understanding. The consequences of this diagnostic deficit were far-reaching, often leading to misinterpretations of symptoms, inappropriate treatments, and significant suffering for countless women. Let us gently explore the landscape of misdiagnosis during this era, recognizing the limitations of the medical knowledge available at the time and the societal biases that further complicated the picture. It's important to approach this period with empathy, remembering that the medical professionals of the time were working with the best information they had, even if that information was often incomplete or inaccurate. One of the most significant barriers to accurate diagnosis was the limited understanding of mental health conditions themselves. Anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses were often poorly defined and lacked the clear diagnostic criteria we have today. The terminology used was frequently vague and imprecise, further hindering accurate assessment and treatment. Diagnoses like neurasthenia, hysteria, and nervous exhaustion were commonly applied to women exhibiting a wide range of symptoms, often masking the underlying causes of their distress. These broad diagnostic labels frequently failed to account for the complex interplay of biological, psychological, and social factors contributing to women's mental health challenges. The societal pressures and gender roles of the time, limited opportunities, restrictive expectations, and the suppression of emotional expression were rarely considered in the diagnostic process. Instead, women's anxieties were often attributed to inherent weaknesses or flaws in their character, reinforcing harmful stereotypes and stigmatizing their experiences. The lack of specialized mental health professionals also contributed to misdiagnosis. General practitioners often lacked the training and expertise to accurately assess and treat mental health conditions, relying on outdated theories and limited diagnostic tools. Many women receive treatment from individuals lacking the necessary qualifications, further increasing the risk of misdiagnosis and inappropriate care. Furthermore, the subjective nature of many mental health symptoms made accurate diagnosis challenging. Symptoms like fatigue, irritability, sleep disturbances, and difficulty concentrating could be indicative of various conditions, making it difficult to pinpoint the underlying cause without comprehensive assessment. The lack of standardized diagnostic procedures and the reliance on subjective observations further increased the likelihood of misdiagnosis. The consequences of misdiagnosis were profound and often devastating for women. Inappropriate treatments, ranging from rest cures and hydrotherapy to more invasive procedures, were frequently prescribed without a clear understanding of their effectiveness or potential risks. These treatments often failed to address the underlying causes of women's anxiety, sometimes even exacerbating their symptoms and leading to further suffering. The societal stigma surrounding mental illness also played a significant role in perpetuating the cycle of misdiagnosis and inadequate treatment. Women were often reluctant to seek help for their anxieties due to fear of judgment, shame, and social ostracization. This reluctance to seek professional help often resulted in delayed diagnosis and treatment, further prolonging their suffering. The legacy of misdiagnosis in the early 20th century highlights the crucial need for improved understanding, accurate diagnosis, and appropriate treatment of women's mental health conditions. By acknowledging the historical context of misdiagnosis, we can gain valuable insights into the challenges of providing equitable and effective mental health care. The journey toward improved understanding and treatment is an ongoing process, requiring ongoing research, education, and a commitment to breaking down the stigma surrounding mental illness. Let us strive to create a future where women's mental health concerns are treated with the respect, understanding, and comprehensive care they deserve. The past serves as a reminder of how far we've come and how far we still need to go. Now, let's turn our attention to a period where the search for solace from anxiety led to a widespread, yet ultimately detrimental, reliance on potent substances, the use of opium and laudanum. These substances, while offering temporary relief, ultimately contributed to a cycle of dependence and long-term health complications for many women. Opium, derived from the opium poppy, has a long and complex history, its medicinal properties recognized and exploited for centuries. In the context of women's anxiety, opium and its derivative, laudanum, an opium tincture dissolved in alcohol, were frequently prescribed as sedatives and pain relievers. They offered a seemingly quick escape from the turmoil of anxious thoughts and feelings, a temporary hush in the midst of inner storms. The allure of these substances was undeniable. In a time when understanding of mental health was limited and effective treatments were scarce, opium and laudanum offered a readily available, albeit deceptive, solution. Doctors, often lacking alternative options, prescribed them liberally, unaware of the insidious nature of their addictive potential. For women struggling with anxiety, the temporary relief provided by these drugs could seem like a lifeline, a much-needed escape from the relentless pressure of their internal struggles. However, the deceptive nature of this relief soon became apparent. The initial calming effect gradually gave way to a cycle of dependence, where increasing doses were needed to achieve the same level of sedation. The temporary respite from anxiety was replaced by a new set of challenges: physical dependence, withdrawal symptoms, and a worsening of underlying health issues. The addictive nature of opium and laudanum was not fully understood at the time. The long-term effects of chronic use were often overlooked, leading to a cycle of dependence that was difficult to break. Women who relied on these substances often found themselves trapped in a vicious circle, their anxiety exacerbated by the very remedies intended to alleviate it. The physical and mental toll was significant, often leading to further deterioration of their overall health and well-being. Moreover, the social stigma associated with opium addiction further complicated the situation. Women who became dependent on these substances often faced isolation, shame, and judgment, further hindering their ability to seek help and recover. The secrecy surrounding their addiction often prevented them from receiving the support and treatment they desperately needed. The widespread use of opium and laudanum as a treatment for anxiety highlights the limitations of medical knowledge and the lack of effective alternative treatments during this time. It also underscores the importance of understanding the addictive potential of substances and the need for careful consideration when prescribing them, especially for individuals struggling with mental health challenges. The story of opium and laudanum use in the treatment of anxiety is a poignant reminder of the need for ethical and evidence-based approaches to mental health care, where the well-being of the patient always takes precedence. The long-term effects of opium and laudanum use extended beyond physical dependence. These substances often exacerbated existing mental health issues, leading to depression, cognitive impairment, and other debilitating conditions. The cycle of dependence, coupled with the social stigma and lack of effective treatment options, left many women struggling with both physical and emotional distress. The narrative of opium and laudanum use in the treatment of women's anxiety is a somber chapter in the history of mental health care. It serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of relying on addictive substances as a primary treatment for complex mental health conditions. It also highlights the crucial need for a more holistic and compassionate approach to mental health care, one that prioritizes the well-being of the patient and avoids the pitfalls of readily available but ultimately harmful solutions. This understanding is essential as we continue to strive for a future where effective and ethical treatments are available to all who need them. The gentle fading light of the past illuminates the path towards a brighter, more informed present and future. Now, let us delve into a realm of treatments that, while seemingly less invasive than some we've explored, still held the potential for significant harm. The practices of leeching and cupping. These methods, employed for centuries in various cultures, reflect a historical understanding of the body and illness that often prioritized bloodletting as a means of restoring balance. In the context of women's anxiety, these practices were often applied with little consideration for their actual efficacy or potential negative consequences. Imagine, if you will, the scene: a dimly lit chamber, the air thick with the scent of herbs and the faint metallic tang of blood. A woman, her face etched with the worry of anxiety, lies upon a bed. A practitioner, perhaps a physician or a more local healer, approaches with tools of their trade: small, wriggling leeches or a set of heated cups. The belief underpinning these treatments was that anxiety stemmed from an imbalance in bodily humors, a concept prevalent in ancient and medieval medicine, and that removing blood would restore equilibrium. Leeches, those seemingly innocuous creatures, were applied to the skin to draw blood from the affected area. The rationale behind this practice was that by removing bad blood, the underlying cause of the anxiety would be addressed. The belief, though rooted in a now-disproven theory, was widespread and deeply ingrained in the medical understanding of the time. For women experiencing anxiety, the application of leeches represented a tangible attempt to address their distress, even if the underlying logic was flawed. Cupping, on the other hand, involved placing heated cups onto the skin, creating a suction that drew blood to the surface. The resulting marks, often circular and purplish, were seen as evidence of the process working, a visible manifestation of the imbalance being corrected. This visual evidence, while offering a sense of agency and perhaps temporary relief, did little to address the underlying cause of the anxiety. While both leeching and cupping were believed to alleviate anxiety by removing excess blood, their efficacy is highly questionable. In reality, these treatments carried a significant risk of infection, blood loss, and scarring. The potential for harm was considerable, especially given the lack of sterile techniques and the limited understanding of infection control in those times. For women already vulnerable and struggling with anxiety, these treatments could inflict further physical and emotional trauma. The application of leeches and cupping in the treatment of women's anxiety highlights the limitations of medical understanding in previous centuries. The reliance on these practices, despite their questionable efficacy and potential for harm, reveals a significant gap between the beliefs of the time and our modern understanding of mental health. The historical record serves as a sobering reminder of the importance of evidence-based medicine and the need for treatments that are both safe and effective. It's crucial to remember that these practices were not simply misguided attempts at healing. They were deeply embedded within the cultural and medical landscape of their time. The belief system that underpinned them was widespread and accepted, and the practitioners who employed these methods were often acting within the best of their understanding. However, this does not diminish the suffering endured by women who underwent these potentially harmful treatments. The story of leeching and cupping in the treatment of anxiety serves as a valuable lesson in the evolution of medical understanding. It highlights the importance of critical evaluation, the need for evidence-based practices, and the ongoing responsibility to ensure that all treatments are not only effective, but also safe and respectful of the patient's well-being. As we reflect on these historical practices, we can appreciate the progress made in mental health care, while acknowledging the enduring need for compassion and a commitment to providing truly effective and ethical care. The echoes of the past remind us to continually question, to learn, and to strive for a future where the treatment of mental illness is informed by science, empathy, and a profound respect for human dignity. The gentle rustling of history's pages whispers a tale of progress, a journey from misunderstanding to understanding, from harm to healing. Now, let's turn our attention to a practice that, while seemingly harsh, held a certain logic within its historical context: cold water immersion. This method, used for centuries to treat a range of ailments, including anxiety, involves submerging the patient in cold water, often for extended periods. The rationale behind this approach was multifaceted, reflecting the prevailing medical understanding of the time, which often intertwined physical and mental health in ways that are now considered simplistic, even misguided. Imagine a scene: a chilly dawn, mist clinging to the air. A woman, her anxieties weighing heavily upon her, is led to a natural spring or a purposefully constructed cold bath. The water, shockingly cold, sends shivers through her as she is gently lowered into its depths. This was not a spa-like experience. It was a treatment intended to shock the system, to jolt the body out of its perceived imbalance. The belief underpinning cold water immersion was often rooted in the humoral theory, the idea that the body contained four key humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and that illness resulted from an imbalance among these humors. Anxiety, in this framework, might be attributed to an excess of heat or a disruption in the body's natural flow. The cold water was believed to counteract this imbalance, acting as a kind of natural reset for the system. Another aspect of the rationale involved the shock therapy element. The sudden plunge into cold water was intended to jolt the nervous system, potentially interrupting cycles of anxiety and providing a temporary respite from overwhelming mental distress. The intense physical sensation was believed to override the mental turmoil, offering a brief period of calm amidst the storm. This approach, though lacking the scientific understanding we possess today, reflects a desire to address the profound disruption experienced by those suffering from anxiety. While cold water immersion might seem drastic by modern standards, it's essential to consider the context. In the absence of effective pharmacological interventions, and with a limited understanding of the complexities of the nervous system, this practice represented a tangible, if somewhat extreme, attempt to alleviate suffering. For women experiencing debilitating anxiety, the option of cold water immersion, while potentially unpleasant, might have seemed preferable to the uncertainty and despair of untreated illness. However, it's crucial to acknowledge the risks associated with this treatment. The potential for hypothermia, shock, and even drowning was very real. The intensity of the cold could trigger adverse reactions in vulnerable individuals, exacerbating their condition rather than alleviating it. Furthermore, the lack of medical supervision in many instances could lead to severe complications. The apparent simplicity of the treatment belied its potential dangers. The practice of cold water immersion offers a fascinating glimpse into the historical treatment of anxiety. It reflects both the limitations of past medical understanding and the enduring human desire to find relief from suffering. While we now understand the complexities of anxiety and possess more nuanced and effective treatments, the history of cold water immersion serves as a poignant reminder of the challenges faced by those who lived before us and the importance of ongoing research and compassionate care. The chill of the past lingers, reminding us of the need for empathy and a constant pursuit of better ways to support those grappling with mental health challenges. The echoes of the past, though sometimes harsh, guide us towards a future where understanding and healing walk hand in hand. As we delve deeper into the historical tapestry of women's mental health, a crucial thread emerges: the pervasive influence of patriarchal structures on healthcare access and the quality of treatment received. This isn't simply a matter of men making medical decisions for women. It's a complex interplay of societal expectations, power dynamics, and ingrained biases that shaped the very landscape of women's healthcare experiences. Imagine a world where a woman's voice, particularly regarding her own emotional well-being, is often silenced or dismissed. This was the reality for countless women throughout history, where societal norms dictated that women should be submissive, quiet, and primarily focused on domestic roles. Expressions of anxiety, seen as disruptive to this ideal, were often interpreted not as genuine distress, but as a symptom of weakness, moral failing, or even demonic possession. This societal pressure to conform had profound implications for healthcare. Women's experiences of anxiety were frequently disregarded, minimized, or pathologized in ways that reinforced existing gender roles. Their symptoms might be attributed to inherent female fragility, hormonal imbalances, or simply a lack of proper feminine virtue. This skewed understanding often led to treatments that were not only ineffective but also harmful. Access to healthcare itself was often limited for women. In many historical periods, women had less economic autonomy, fewer educational opportunities, and less social standing than men. This meant they had less access to resources, including healthcare providers and effective treatments. Their concerns were often relegated to a secondary position, overshadowed by the healthcare needs of men. This disparity meant that women's mental health needs were often overlooked, further exacerbating their suffering. Even when women did receive treatment, the quality often fell short of standards set for men. Medical professionals, overwhelmingly male, frequently lacked the understanding and empathy necessary to address women's unique experiences with anxiety. Their perceptions were shaped by societal biases and gendered expectations, leading to misdiagnosis, inappropriate treatments, and a general lack of compassion. The very language used to describe women's mental health conditions reflected this patriarchal bias. Terms like hysteria, a diagnosis overwhelmingly applied to women, carried a heavy stigma and were often linked to moral failings or perceived sexual repression. This language further marginalized women, reinforcing the idea that their distress was not a legitimate medical concern but a personal flaw. The lack of female representation in the medical profession further compounded the problem. The absence of female voices in the development and delivery of healthcare meant that treatments were often designed and implemented without considering the unique perspectives and needs of women. This lack of inclusivity led to a system that was, in many ways, ill-equipped to address women's mental health effectively. The influence of patriarchal structures on women's mental health is a long and complex story, a narrative woven with societal norms, power imbalances, and ingrained biases. Understanding this history is crucial to appreciating the challenges faced by women throughout history and to building a more equitable and compassionate healthcare system today. The silence of the past must be countered by the amplified voices of the present, ensuring that women's mental health receives the attention, understanding, and effective treatment it deserves. Now, let's consider the profound impact of limited access to education on women's understanding of their own bodies and mental health. Throughout much of history, educational opportunities for women were severely restricted, leaving them with a significantly diminished capacity to navigate their physical and emotional experiences. This lack of knowledge created a fertile ground for misunderstanding, misdiagnosis, and ultimately, ineffective or even harmful treatments. Imagine a world where even basic knowledge of anatomy and physiology was largely unavailable to women. Without the tools to comprehend their own bodies, women were at the mercy of prevailing medical theories, many of which were based on flawed assumptions and biased interpretations. The very act of seeking medical help could be daunting, hampered by a lack of understanding of medical terminology, procedures, and potential risks. This educational deficit had a particularly profound effect on the understanding and treatment of anxiety. Without access to information about mental health, women were left to grapple with their symptoms in isolation, often resorting to self-treatments or relying on folk remedies that may have been ineffective or even detrimental. The lack of knowledge also meant that women were less able to advocate for themselves within the healthcare system, rendering them more susceptible to misdiagnosis and inappropriate treatments. Moreover, limited access to education reinforced societal biases that minimized women's experiences of anxiety. In a society where women's voices were often silenced, the lack of education further marginalized their emotional struggles. Their anxieties were more easily dismissed or attributed to factors unrelated to their actual experiences, leading to treatments that failed to address the underlying issues. Consider, for instance, the historical prevalence of diagnoses like hysteria, a term largely applied to women and often linked to supposed sexual repression or moral weakness. This diagnosis, devoid of any real understanding of the underlying psychological mechanisms, reflected a broader societal failure to recognize women's emotional needs. Without education to challenge such assumptions, women were left vulnerable to these biased and inaccurate diagnoses. The absence of educational opportunities also affected women's ability to access information about alternative coping mechanisms. Without access to resources on stress management, mindfulness, or other forms of self-care, women were left with limited strategies for managing their anxiety. This lack of knowledge further isolated them and reinforced the sense of helplessness that often accompanies mental health struggles. The impact of this educational disparity extends beyond the individual level. Without educated women actively participating in healthcare, the medical understanding of women's health remained incomplete. The lack of female voices in medical research and practice meant that treatment approaches were often developed and implemented without a full understanding of women's unique experiences with anxiety. As we reflect on this historical context, we can see that limited access to education played a crucial role in shaping women's experiences with anxiety. This lack of knowledge not only hindered their ability to understand and manage their symptoms, but also reinforced societal biases that marginalized their struggles and limited their access to effective care. The legacy of this educational inequality continues to impact women's mental health even today, highlighting the enduring importance of education and empowerment in promoting well-being. The path to better mental health for women is inextricably linked to the path to greater educational opportunities and the recognition of women's inherent value and expertise in all aspects of their lives. Now, let us gently turn our attention to the emotional landscape experienced by women subjected to these historical treatments for anxiety. Imagine the chilling fear that must have gripped their hearts as they faced procedures they did not understand, performed by practitioners whose motives and methods were often shrouded in mystery and steeped in superstition. The unknown, coupled with the physical discomfort and potential harm, must have been a constant source of dread. Picture a young woman, perhaps barely out of childhood, being led to a cold, damp room for a water cure. The chill of the water itself, the unfamiliar setting, the lack of explanation, the absence of comforting words, all would have contributed to a sense of profound vulnerability and isolation. She would have been alone in her fear, stripped of her agency, left at the mercy of a system that did not value her understanding or consent. The isolation extended beyond the physical setting. Many women found themselves unable to confide in friends or family, either out of fear of judgment or because societal expectations silence their distress. The stigma surrounding mental health, particularly for women, created a wall of silence that further compounded their feelings of loneliness and despair. They endured their suffering in secret, their emotional turmoil unseen and unheard. The lack of understanding from those around them added another layer to their suffering. Family members, friends, and even medical practitioners often lack the knowledge or empathy to comprehend the complexities of women's emotional experiences. Their symptoms were often dismissed, attributed to weakness or moral failings, or explained away by outdated and inaccurate medical theories. This lack of validation and support only intensified the feelings of isolation and hopelessness. Imagine the helplessness of a woman enduring bloodletting, the sharp pain of the lancet followed by the weakening flow of her own blood, all in the name of restoring a hypothetical balance. Or picture the confinement and monotony of a rest cure, where inactivity and isolation were prescribed as remedies, exacerbating feelings of depression and anxiety rather than alleviating them. Each treatment, intended to heal, instead inflicted a deeper wound of emotional trauma. The fear of the unknown extended beyond the immediate physical treatment. Women may have worried about the long-term consequences of these interventions, wondering if they would ever fully recover, if their symptoms would worsen, or if they would be permanently marked by their experiences. This constant anxiety, coupled with the physical and emotional distress caused by the treatments themselves, created a cycle of fear and suffering. The sense of isolation was particularly acute for women whose symptoms were deemed to be stemming from a wandering womb, a concept that blamed women's bodies for their emotional distress. This theory, deeply rooted in patriarchal societal structures, not only invalidated their experiences but also isolated them further, making it more difficult to seek help or find comfort. Moreover, the lack of understanding from medical professionals often led to a misdiagnosis and mistreatment, compounding the sense of isolation and fear. The women were not only suffering from their symptoms, but also from the feeling of being misunderstood and alone in their struggle. They were not just patients, but rather victims of a system that failed to recognize and address their needs. As we reflect on these experiences, it is crucial to approach them with empathy and understanding. These women were not simply patients. They were individuals enduring immense emotional and physical suffering, often without the support or understanding they desperately needed. Their stories serve as a poignant reminder of the importance of compassion, accurate diagnosis, and effective treatment in addressing women's mental health. Their suffering underscores the vital need for a healthcare system that values and respects the unique experiences of all individuals, ensuring that no one ever feels the isolation and fear that permeated the historical treatment of women's anxiety. The silence must be broken, and their stories, though painful, must be heard. Let us now delve deeper into the disheartening lack of understanding and support that characterized the historical response to women's anxiety. It's a story woven with threads of societal prejudice, medical ignorance, and a profound absence of empathy. Imagine the weight of unspoken suffering, the burden of feeling unheard and unseen, a burden carried by countless women throughout history. Consider the pervasive influence of the wandering womb theory, a notion that attributed women's emotional distress to a literally misplaced organ. This wasn't simply a misdiagnosis. It was a profound dismissal of genuine suffering, a reduction of complex emotional experiences into a simplistic and, frankly, absurd anatomical explanation. Instead of seeking to understand the root causes of a woman's anxiety, this theory blamed her body, her very essence, for her distress. This lack of understanding extended far beyond the realm of medical theory. It permeated societal structures, shaping the way women were perceived and treated. Their anxieties were often dismissed as mere nerves, weakness, or even hysteria, terms that served to pathologize and stigmatize their experiences rather than validate them. These labels weren't merely clinical descriptions. They were weapons of social control, silencing women's voices and reinforcing their subordinate position within society. The absence of empathy was particularly evident in the treatment methods employed. Bloodletting, a practice based on the discredited humoral theory, subjected women to painful and often debilitating procedures, all in the name of restoring a mythical balance of bodily humors. Rest cures, while seemingly gentler, often resulted in prolonged isolation and inactivity, exacerbating rather than alleviating their emotional distress. These treatments, far from being acts of healing, were often acts of further debilitation and disregard. Moreover, women often lacked the power to advocate for themselves. Their voices were frequently unheard, their concerns dismissed by medical professionals who held positions of authority and whose knowledge was often limited by the biases of their time. The patriarchal structures of society ensured that women had limited access to education and resources, further hindering their ability to understand their own bodies and seek appropriate care. The lack of understanding also manifested in the failure to recognize the interconnectedness of women's physical and mental health. Often, their emotional distress was treated in isolation, without considering the broader social and environmental factors that could be contributing to their anxiety. Poverty, societal pressures, and lack of control over their own lives were often overlooked, even though these factors are known to significantly impact mental well-being. The absence of support extended to the absence of compassionate human connection. Imagine the isolating experience of undergoing these treatments alone, without the comfort of understanding friends or family members. The societal stigma surrounding mental illness further deepened this isolation, leaving women feeling ashamed and alone in their suffering. Even when more humane approaches, like the moral treatment movement, emerged, the underlying biases often remained. While some practitioners attempted to create more supportive environments, the focus was still often on managing symptoms rather than addressing the root causes of women's anxieties. The inherent inequality within society continued to cast a long shadow over the treatment of women's mental health. As we reflect on these historical failures, it is vital to acknowledge the profound impact of the lack of understanding and support on women's emotional well-being. Their experiences were not merely medical events. They were deeply personal and often traumatic encounters with a system that failed them at every turn. By understanding this history, we can strive to create a future where women's mental health is treated with empathy, respect, and a deep understanding of the complex interplay between individual experiences and societal structures. The empathy and support they lacked in the past must be a cornerstone of our approach today. Their stories must serve as a powerful reminder of the profound importance of compassionate and informed care. Now, let's consider the pervasive shadow of stigma that has long accompanied mental illness, and how this shadow fell particularly heavily upon women throughout history. Imagine the immense courage it must have taken for a woman to even acknowledge, let alone seek help for, emotional distress in a society that often viewed such struggles as signs of weakness, moral failing, or even demonic possession. The stigma wasn't simply a matter of societal disapproval. It was woven into the very fabric of medical understanding. Terms like hysteria, far from being neutral clinical descriptions, carried with them a weight of social judgment, implying irrationality, instability, and a lack of self-control. These labels weren't just diagnoses. They were social pronouncements, branding women as flawed and unworthy of sympathy or understanding. Such judgment further isolated women struggling with their mental health, making them hesitant to seek help for fear of judgment, ridicule, or even social ostracism. The consequences of this stigma were far-reaching. Women often suffered in silence, concealing their struggles from family, friends, and even medical professionals for fear of the social repercussions. This silence perpetuated a vicious cycle, preventing them from receiving the support and treatment they needed, and leaving them feeling increasingly isolated and alone in their suffering. The very act of seeking help could be fraught with peril. Even if a woman managed to overcome the stigma and seek professional assistance, the treatment she received might only reinforce her sense of shame and inadequacy. Many historical treatments, as we've discussed, were not only ineffective but also humiliating and dehumanizing, leaving women feeling further stigmatized and alienated. The social consequences of a mental illness diagnosis could be devastating. It could lead to the loss of relationships, social standing, and even economic independence. In a time when women's roles were often confined to the domestic sphere, a diagnosis of mental illness could lead to further marginalization, limiting their opportunities and reinforcing their dependence on others. This societal pressure often forced women to hide their struggles, compounding their suffering and deepening their sense of isolation. The stigma extended beyond the individual level, impacting families and communities as well. Mental illness was often viewed as a shameful family secret, leading to concealment and denial, which prevented families from seeking help and support. This secrecy contributed to a lack of understanding and empathy, reinforcing the cycle of stigma and suffering. It's important to remember that this stigma wasn't simply a historical phenomenon. It continues to cast a long shadow over mental health today. Although we've made progress in reducing the stigma, the lingering effects of past prejudices are still felt, particularly within certain communities and cultural contexts. This historical perspective underscores the crucial need for continued efforts to destigmatize mental illness, fostering a culture of understanding, compassion, and support for those who are struggling. The stories of women who suffered in silence, who endured ineffective and often cruel treatments, and who were judged and ostracized for their emotional distress serve as a powerful reminder of the devastating consequences of stigma. These stories demand our attention, urging us to create a future where those struggling with mental health are met not with judgment and shame, but with empathy, understanding, and the support they deserve. Let us remember that the struggles they faced were not merely medical ailments. They were deeply human experiences that deserve our recognition and respect. The silence of the past must become the voice of compassion for the present and the future. The past should serve not only as a cautionary tale, but also as a foundation upon which we build a more supportive and compassionate world. A world where seeking help for anxiety is not an act of courage born of necessity, but an act of self-care embraced without fear. Let us now gently turn our attention to the lasting impact of these historical treatments and societal attitudes on the lives and opportunities available to women. The ripple effect of misunderstanding and mistreatment extended far beyond the immediate experience of a particular therapy or diagnosis. It shaped the very fabric of women's existence, influencing their relationships, their roles in society, and their access to personal fulfillment. Consider the woman confined to a rest cure, her days spent in enforced inactivity, her spirit slowly wilting under the weight of enforced idleness. The physical limitations imposed by these treatments often bled into the emotional and intellectual spheres. The enforced isolation could lead to profound feelings of loneliness and disconnection, further exacerbating existing anxieties and hindering recovery. This isolation was not merely physical. It was a social and emotional confinement, cutting women off from the support networks they needed. The long-term consequences extended beyond the immediate period of treatment. The enforced passivity of the rest cure, for example, could leave women feeling weakened and dependent, undermining their sense of self-efficacy and their ability to participate fully in life. This dependency could extend beyond the physical, affecting their emotional and intellectual independence, leaving them feeling vulnerable and disempowered. The societal attitudes that fueled these treatments also profoundly affected women's opportunities. The persistent association of anxiety and other mental health challenges with weakness and instability often limited women's access to education, employment, and social advancement. The very act of seeking help could be a barrier to opportunities, as a diagnosis could cast a shadow over a woman's reputation, hindering her progress in her personal and professional life. The impact on relationships was equally profound. The stigma surrounding mental illness could strain relationships with family and friends, leading to isolation and a lack of support. Even within families, the lack of understanding and the prevailing societal attitudes could lead to misunderstandings, conflict, and emotional distance. This emotional isolation compounded the woman's struggles, hindering recovery and increasing the sense of loneliness and despair. The cumulative effect of these treatments and attitudes was a significant impediment to women's overall well-being. The combination of ineffective treatments, social stigma, and limited opportunities created a cycle of suffering that could span generations. The impact extended to their daughters, sisters, and friends, perpetuating a culture of silence and misunderstanding around women's mental health. It's crucial to remember that the experiences of women facing anxiety were not simply medical concerns. They were inextricably intertwined with the social, political, and economic realities of their time. The limitations imposed upon them were not solely the result of medical ignorance. They were the product of deeply ingrained societal biases and inequalities. Understanding this complex interplay is essential to fully appreciate the magnitude of the historical challenges faced by women and to recognize the ongoing need for equity and justice in the provision of mental health care. The journey towards more effective and compassionate care for women's mental health requires a multifaceted approach. It requires not only advancements in medical knowledge and treatment, but also a fundamental shift in societal attitudes and beliefs. The history of women's mental health care serves as a poignant reminder of the profound impact of societal biases and the urgent need to create a world where all individuals, regardless of gender, have access to equitable and effective mental health support. It is a call to action, a plea to learn from the past, and to build a future that prioritizes empathy, understanding, and the unwavering pursuit of well-being for all. Let us carry the weight of these stories not as a burden, but as a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring need for compassionate care. The echoes of the past must guide us towards a more equitable and just future, where the well-being of every woman is valued and protected. As the dawn of the 20th century approached, a subtle yet significant shift began to emerge in the landscape of women's mental health. While the echoes of past misconceptions and harmful practices lingered, a growing awareness of the limitations of previous approaches began to take root. This nascent change was not a sudden revolution, but a gradual evolution, a slow and painstaking process of questioning, reevaluating, and ultimately, reforming the way women's anxieties were understood and addressed. The seeds of this transformation were sown by courageous individuals, researchers, clinicians, and advocates who dare to challenge the established norms and question the validity of long-held beliefs. Their efforts were not without resistance, as entrenched attitudes and ingrained biases proved difficult to overcome. Yet, their persistence slowly chipped away at the foundations of outdated practices, paving the way for a more compassionate and evidence-based approach to women's mental health. One of the key drivers of this shift was the advancement of scientific knowledge. As our understanding of the human brain and the complexities of mental illness deepened, so too did our ability to develop more effective diagnostic tools and therapeutic interventions. The emergence of psychodynamic theory, for example, offered a new framework for understanding the psychological underpinnings of anxiety, moving beyond simplistic explanations rooted in anatomical misconceptions or moral failings. Alongside these scientific advancements, a growing social awareness of gender inequality contributed to a gradual shift in societal attitudes. The women's suffrage movement and the fight for equal rights played a crucial role in raising awareness of the systemic barriers that prevented women from accessing adequate health care and achieving their full potential. This growing awareness helped to challenge the prevailing stereotypes and biases that often stigmatized women's mental health experiences. The development of new therapeutic approaches, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and interpersonal therapy, IPT, offered further progress. These therapies provided women with practical tools and strategies to manage their anxiety symptoms and improve their overall well-being. Unlike the passive and often isolating treatments of the past, these approaches empowered women to take an active role in their recovery, fostering a sense of agency and self-efficacy. The establishment of specialized mental health services for women also played a vital role in this transition. The creation of women's health clinics and mental health programs specifically designed to address the unique needs of women marked a significant step forward in the provision of equitable and accessible care. These specialized services recognize the importance of addressing the intersection of gender, culture, and mental health, fostering a more holistic and culturally sensitive approach to treatment. However, it is crucial to acknowledge that the progress made in the later 20th and 21st centuries is not without its limitations. Despite significant advancements in our understanding and treatment of women's anxiety, significant challenges remain. Stigma continues to be a major barrier to help seeking, preventing many women from accessing the care they need. Inequities in access to mental health care persist, particularly for women from marginalized communities who often face multiple layers of disadvantage. The ongoing struggle for gender equality also highlights the deep-rooted societal factors that continue to influence women's mental health. The persistent pressure to conform to societal expectations, the burden of unpaid care work, and the pervasive experience of gender-based violence all contribute to the disproportionate mental health burden carried by women. Addressing these systemic issues is crucial to creating a truly equitable and just system of mental health care. The journey towards a truly compassionate and evidence-based approach to women's mental health is an ongoing process. It requires continued vigilance, unwavering commitment, and a relentless pursuit of social justice. It is a journey that demands not only advancements in medical science, but also a fundamental shift in societal attitudes and beliefs. As we reflect on the historical struggles and progress made, let us carry forward the lessons learned, ensuring that the voices of women are heard, their experiences are validated, and their needs are met with empathy, understanding, and unwavering support. The path forward requires not only medical advancements, but a deep societal commitment to equality and justice. Only then can we hope to build a world where every woman has the opportunity to flourish. As we draw to the close of our journey through the historical landscape of women's anxiety, let us pause to reflect on the profound lessons learned. The narrative we've explored, from ancient misinterpretations to the more nuanced understanding of today, reveals a compelling truth. The way we treat women's mental health is deeply intertwined with the broader social and cultural context of each era. The past is not merely a collection of forgotten practices. It is a living testament to the enduring impact of societal biases and the persistent struggle for equitable care. The journey through time has shown us how easily misunderstanding can lead to suffering. The wandering womb, the demonization of hysteria, the misguided applications of bloodletting and rest cures. These are not merely historical curiosities. They are stark reminders of how easily prejudice and a lack of knowledge can distort our perception of human experience, leading to ineffective, even harmful treatments. These practices weren't born of malice, but of ignorance, of a failure to see the individual within the societal framework. The story of women's anxiety is also a story of resilience. Despite facing immense obstacles, women throughout history have shown remarkable strength and perseverance in navigating challenging circumstances. Their stories, often untold, are woven into the fabric of this historical narrative, a silent testament to their unwavering spirit. It is a story of quiet courage in the face of adversity, a testament to the human capacity to endure and hope for better days. Understanding this history is not merely an academic exercise. It is a critical step towards building a more just and compassionate future. By acknowledging the mistakes of the past, we can avoid repeating them. By recognizing the limitations of previous approaches, we can strive to develop more effective and equitable systems of care. The past serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the devastating consequences of prejudice and ignorance. But it also serves as a source of inspiration, a testament to the power of progress and the enduring human spirit. The progress made in recent decades, while significant, is not a cause for complacency. The lingering effects of historical biases continue to shape the landscape of women's mental health care today. Disparities in access to care, persistent stigma, and the continuing impact of societal pressures all highlight the need for continued vigilance and ongoing reform. The fight for truly equitable mental health care is far from over. It requires a sustained commitment to understanding the unique challenges women face, to dismantling systemic barriers, and to creating a supportive environment where women feel empowered to seek help and receive the care they deserve. Our journey through history has shown us that the path toward improved mental health care is paved with empathy, understanding, and a commitment to social justice. It demands a shift not only in medical practice, but in societal attitudes. We must actively challenge the stereotypes and biases that still permeate our understanding of women's mental health. We must create spaces where women feel safe to share their experiences without fear of judgment or dismissal. And we must work tirelessly to dismantle the systems that perpetuate inequality and discrimination. The conclusion, therefore, is not an endpoint, but a call to action. It is a call to remember the lessons of the past, to learn from the mistakes made, and to build a future where every woman has access to compassionate, effective, and equitable mental health care. It is a call to celebrate the resilience of women throughout history and to empower them to live full and meaningful lives, free from the constraints of societal expectations and the burden of undue suffering. The story of women's anxiety is not one of defeat, but one of ongoing progress, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit and the unwavering pursuit of a more just and compassionate world. Let us carry the lessons of the past into the future, ensuring that the voices of women are heard, their experiences are understood, and their needs are met with unwavering empathy and support.